Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wonder why some ads seem to, well, know you? Or why companies have so many versions of basically the same thing? Today, that's exactly what we're digging into, the whole strategy behind target marketing. You sent over a great stack of sources on this, so we've got the perfect material to really distill the core ideas for you. Our mission here is basically to give you the shortcut. How do businesses actually find the right customers, figure out what they care about, and then, manage to connect with them? We're really focusing on the foundations here, how they slice up the market and pick their spots. Okay, let's unpack this. What is target marketing, really, at its core?
Right. So essentially, target marketing starts with a company realizing, look, we just can't be everything to everyone, not effectively anyway. The sources really frame it as competing smarter, recognizing that different customers have different needs, different wants. And it breaks down into basically three main steps. First, you got to figure out that the market isn't just one big homogenous group. You identify these distinct groups of buyers, people who share similar needs or characteristics. That part, that's market segmentation. Then second, you look at those groups, those segments, and decide, okay, which one or maybe which few are we best positioned to serve? Where can we really compete well? That's the market targeting part. And the third step, which the sources mentioned we'll get to later, is deciding how you want that chosen group to see you, your positioning.
Okay, so step one is segmentation, breaking it down. What does dividing the market actually look like in practice? How do they find these distinct groups?
Yeah, think of it like taking a big diverse market and slicing it into well-defined pieces. Each slice is a group of customers who are pretty similar in some way that matters. Maybe they want the same things from a product or react similarly to marketing. The marketer's job is basically to identify where those natural dividing lines are, and the sources point to two main buckets of variables they use, especially for consumers. You've got descriptive characteristics, things about people like where they live, age, income, that kind of stuff. Or you look at behavioral things, how people actually act, what needs drive them, what benefits they seek, how they use a product.
Got it. Descriptive and behavioral. Let's start with descriptive. Geographic seems, well, pretty straightforward, right? Location.
It is, yeah. It's fundamental. You can slice the market by countries, regions, states, cities. You can even go right down to neighborhoods or zip codes. Companies might operate just locally or they might be national, but, tweak things for local tastes. That's where you get things like grassroots marketing, really focusing efforts on specific local communities. But what's really interesting is how they combine geography with other stuff. The sources talk about systems like Nielsen Claritas's PRISM.
Prism. What is that exactly?
Right. So PRISM, it doesn't just say where people live, it tries to paint a picture of their lifestyle. It classifies U.S. neighborhoods into these distinct segments based on a whole mix of factors, things like education, income, family type, urbanization level, ethnicity, even how often people move. They boil it down into something like 66 different lifestyle clusters.
Wow, 66. So what do these clusters look like?
They give them these really descriptive names like blue blood estates, wealthy suburbs, or maybe backcountry folks for rural areas, young digerati for urban tech types. And the idea is that people within the same cluster tend to live similar lives, buy similar things, watch similar shows, do similar activities. It gives marketers a much richer profile than just a zip code.
Definitely paints a clearer picture.
Yeah.
But does getting that specific cost more? Is there downside?
There can be, yeah. The sources mention this trade-off. Tailoring things locally can feel super relevant to the customer, which is great. But it can also mean higher marketing costs, maybe less efficient media buys, potential logistical issues, maybe even diluting the main brand image if you're not careful. So it's a balance.
Okay, moving on to demographics. These seem like the ones everyone talks about: age, gender, income. Why are they so popular?
Well, a couple of big reasons. First, demographics often link pretty directly to needs and wants. I mean, a teenager's needs are just different from a retiree's, simple as that. And second, they're usually, relatively speaking, easy to measure. You can get census data, run surveys, look at purchase data. It's tangible information. Even if you're segmenting on something fuzzier like values,
hmm
you often still need demographics to figure out, okay, how big is this group and how do we actually reach them?
Makes sense. Let's break some down.
Yeah.
Age and life cycle stage. How does that work?
Yeah, our needs definitely change as we go through life. Think about toothpaste. Crest has stuff for kids, for adults, for
Yeah.
seniors, right? Different needs, different messages. Or Pampers they target based on whether you're expecting have a newborn, a toddler, a preschooler. Very distinct stages. But the sources make a good point. It's not just about your calendar age. Sometimes the target is more about mindset. You might target people who are, psychologically young, regardless of their actual birth year.
Interesting. And how's that different from life stage? That sounds similar.
It's related, but life stage focuses more on major events or concerns happening in someone's life right now. Things like getting divorced, buying a first house, kids going to college, caring for older parents. These events trigger very specific needs. You suddenly need different services, different products. The sources mention, for example, how the rise in single person households creates opportunities for companies selling everything from furniture to travel.
Right. And gender. Still relevant.
It is, although the lines are blurring more than they used to. But gender can still influence attitudes and behaviors, sometimes based on social conditioning or different ways of processing information. There was that shopping study mentioned. Something about men needing to be invited to touch a product, while women might just pick it up. Or men focusing on specs, women on how it fits their life. These kinds of insights can influence store layout, ad design. P&G apparently started designing some ads specifically with men's perspectives in mind.
Okay. Income, that seems like a no-brainer for segmentation.
It's definitely been used for a long time, especially for things like luxury goods or financial products. But income alone isn't always the whole story. You see companies doing well by specifically targeting lower income groups, for instance. And the sources talk about this trend towards an hourglass-shaped market.
Hourglass market, what's that mean?
It's this idea that consumers are kind of migrating towards the ends, either focusing on discount value or spending on premium and luxury. The middle ground is getting squeezed, so a company like Levi Strauss, they adapt. They have their premium jeans for upscale stores, and they have a different, more affordable line like Signature for mass retailers, hitting both ends of that hourglass.
Ah, I see. That makes sense. What about generations? We hear constantly about millennials, Gen Z.
Yeah, generations are a really powerful lens. People born around the same time often share major formative experiences, music, politics, technology shifts, and that shapes their values, their outlook, how they see the world, and what they buy. The sources lay out the main U.S. cohorts. Millennials, born roughly 77 to 94, grew up digital, can be idealistic, maybe a bit wary of old school marketing. Then Gen X, 64 to 78, saw lots of social change, tech booms, maybe the first generation to face uncertainty about exceeding their parents' lifestyle, tend to be pragmatic, individualistic. Baby boomers, 46 to 64, huge group. Many are now hitting retirement, but are often active, want to stay young, and are surprisingly big online shoppers. And the silent generation, born 25 to 45, often defying age stereotypes, active, sometimes targeted via their grandkids, value quality.
It's fascinating how those shared histories create distinct profiles.
Yeah,
And race and culture, how does that fit in?
super important. This is about multicultural marketing. The key idea is that different ethnic and cultural groups often have unique needs, preferences, and values based on their heritage. You can't just assume they're smaller versions of the mainstream market. It requires a deep understanding. McDonald's is a good example. A huge chunk of their U.S. business comes from diverse groups. Their I'm Lovin' It campaign, rooted in hip hop but with broad appeal, showed that kind of cultural understanding. It's more than just translation. It's about getting the norms, the nuances, the communication styles right for the beginning.
Okay, so that's a lot on the descriptive side, who people are, where they are. Psychographics sounds like it goes deeper.
It definitely does. Psychographics uses psychology and demographics to understand consumers based on things like personality traits, their lifestyle, their core values, and beliefs. The really key insight here is that two people could look identical on paper, same age, same income, live next door, that have totally different psychographic profiles. And that affects everything they buy. The sources mention frameworks like VALS values and lifestyles. It groups adults based on their primary motivation. Are they driven by ideals, achievement, or self-expression, and their level of resources? It helps marketers understand the why, what's really driving purchase decisions beyond just the surface level stuff.
That adds a whole other layer,
Mhm.
understanding the internal drivers. Okay, let's shift gears to that second big category, behavioral segmentation. This is about how people actually interact with the product.
Exactly. This divides the market based on people's knowledge of a product, their attitude towards it, how they use it, or how they respond to it. It looks at things like the specific benefits they're after, their role in the buying process, usage patterns, that sort of thing.
Okay, what are some key behavioral variables? Needs and benefits sounds fundamental.
Absolutely. People buy the same product for different reasons. One person buys a car for fuel economy, another for status, another for hauling kids around. Segmenting based on the core need or benefit someone is seeking gives you really clear direction for it, like product features and how you talk about them in your marketing.
And decision roles. You mentioned earlier that it's not always just one person buying something.
Right. Often there are multiple people involved. The sources identify 5 roles: Initiator first gets the idea. Influencer, their opinion matters. Decider makes the final call. Buyer actually makes the purchase. And user, the one who consumes or uses it. Think about buying, say, a treadmill. Maybe one person initiates the idea, we should get healthier. A friend influences the brand choice. The first person researches and decides which model. Their partner actually clicks buy online, and maybe the whole family uses it. Companies need to understand who plays which role because you might need to market differently to the influencer than to the user or the buyer.
That's a great way to think about it. What about variables related to actual usage?
Yeah, these are often good places to start. Like, on occasions, when do people get the idea to actually buy or use the product? Is it tied to a specific time of day, a holiday, a life event? Air travel is a classic example. People travel for business, for vacation, for family emergencies. Different occasions trigger different needs and price sensitivities. Marketing can sometimes try to build up new occasions for usage. Then there's user status. Are people non-users, former users, potential users, first-timers, regulars? The key is figuring out why. Why aren't the non-users using? Why did the ex-users leave? Potential users might be linked to a life stage change. Often, market leaders focus on attracting potential users, while smaller firms might try to poach current users from the leader.
And usage rate. Light, medium, heavy users.
Right. The classic Pareto principle often applies that 80-20 rule. A small group of heavy users might account for a huge chunk of your sales. So, naturally, you want to keep them happy. But the sources add a good caution. Heavy users aren't all the same. Some might be super loyal to your brand. Others might just be heavy users of the category and constantly chase the lowest price. You need to know which is which.
Buyer readiness stage, this sounds like the classic marketing funnel, moving people along.
Exactly. It segments people based on how close they are to buying. Are they unaware the product exists? Aware but not interested. Interested but haven't decided. Intending to buy soon. Knowing where people are in this process tells you what your marketing needs to achieve. Build awareness. Provide more info. Create desire. Close the sale. Companies track this to see where they're succeeding and where people are dropping off.
And loyalty status, crucial for keeping customers.
Definitely. The sources typically break this into 4 groups. You've got your hardcore loyals, they buy your brand all the time. Split loyals, they switch between maybe 2 or 3 brands. Shifting loyals, they're moving from one brand preference to another over time. And switchers, basically no loyalty, always looking for a deal or something new. Studying each group gives you different insights. Your hardcore fans tell you what you're doing right. Split loyals show you who your main competitors are. Shifting loyals and switchers can reveal your weaknesses, but again, a caution. What looks like loyalty might just be habit or indifference, or maybe there just aren't other good options available easily.
Good point. And the last one here is attitude, how people feel.
Yep, simple spectrum. Enthusiastic, positive, indifferent, negative, hostile. Your strategy changes depending on the attitude. You want to reinforce the enthusiasts, convert the positives, try to win over the indifferent if possible, and usually not waste too much time or money on the really negative or hostile ones. It's about focusing your efforts where they'll have the most impact.
That's a comprehensive look at consumer segmentation. How different is it when businesses are selling to other businesses? There's definitely overlap. Businesses also care about geography, the benefits they seek, usage rate. Those still apply. But then you layer on variables specific to organizations. The sources mention things like demographics. What industry are they in? How big is the company? Where are they located? Operating variables. What technology do they use? Are they a heavy or light user of our type of product? What are their technical capabilities? Purchasing approaches. How do they buy? Is it centralized? Who holds the power? Do we have an existing relationship? What are their general purchasing policies? Situational factors. How urgent is their need? Is it for a specific application? How large is the typical order? And even personal characteristics, things like buyer-seller similarity, the buyer's attitude towards risk, their loyalty to suppliers. Wow, okay, that's definitely more complex. It's not just about the end user.
Exactly. You have to understand their whole business context. Marketers often use a step-by-step approach here. Maybe start broad macro segmentation, like the aluminum company example. First, target specific industries, say transportation. Then, within that, maybe focus on a specific product application, like components for RVs. Then maybe target only the largest RV manufacturers. Then you might micro-segment those large manufacturers based on what they value most: price, service, technical support, and you target the segment that best matches what your company offers. The sources also mention the idea of flexible offerings for businesses, maybe a basic naked solution that everyone values, plus optional add-ons at extra cost for those who need more.
That tiered approach makes sense. So, Once a company has done all this slicing and dicing, identified potential segments, they can't chase all of them. How do they actually choose which ones to target?
Right, this is the critical targeting part. And yeah, you need to evaluate those segments. Often marketers combine variables, maybe starting with needs, as the sources suggest. There are frameworks, like Roger Best's 7 Steps mentioned, to systematically assess segments.
And presumably, not every segment identified is actually a good segment to target, even if it exists.
Exactly. The sources list 5 key criteria for a useful segment. First, it has to be measurable. Can you actually figure out its size, its purchasing power, its characteristics? If you can't quantify it, it's hard to target. Second, substantial. Is it big enough or profitable enough to be worth the effort? It needs to be the largest possible group worth going after with a tailored program. Third, accessible. Can you actually reach these people with your marketing and products? If they're unreachable, the segment isn't viable for you. Fourth, differentiable. Does this segment respond differently to marketing efforts than other segments? If 2 groups react exactly the same way, they aren't really separate segments from a practical standpoint. Like the perfume example, if married and single women react identically to a sale, they aren't distinct segments for that sale. And finally, actionable. Can you actually develop effective programs to attract and serve this segment? Do you have the resources and capabilities?
Those are really practical hurdles. Beyond the segment's own characteristics, what about the competition?
Huge factor. The sources bring in Michael Porter's 5 forces model here, applying it to segment attractiveness. It helps assess the competitive intensity. You look at the threat of rivalry within the segment, lots of strong competitors. A shrinking market. High cost to exit. That makes it less attractive. Threat of new entrants. Is it easy for others to jump in and steal share? High entry barriers make a segment more appealing long-term. Threat of substitutes. Are there other ways customers can meet the same need? Lots of substitutes limit your pricing power. Threat of buyers' bargaining power. Are the customers powerful? Can they easily switch? Can they demand lower prices? That reduces attractiveness. And threat of suppliers' bargaining power. Are your suppliers powerful? Can they dictate prices or terms? That also squeezes profitability. So a segment might look good initially, but if these competitive forces are really intense, it might be a tough place to make money.
So it's about the segment's inherent qualities in the competitive environment.
Precisely. The final choice involves weighing the segment's overall attractiveness against the company's own goals and resources. Is this a good fit for us? Can we win here?
Okay, so they've picked their target segment or segments. How do they actually approach serving them? What are the different levels of targeting?
Right, there's a spectrum. At one end, you have full market coverage. This is usually just for the really big players, think Microsoft, Coke. They aim to serve all customer groups with pretty much all the products they might need in that category. They might do this through undifferentiated marketing, basically one offer for the whole market, ignoring segments. Mass marketing. It's efficient in theory, but hard to pull off today with so much market fragmentation. Or, more commonly now, differentiated marketing. They design different products and programs for different segments. Think automakers with SUVs, sedans, trucks, luxury lines. This usually leads to higher sales overall, but also higher costs. R&D, manufacturing, marketing all go up. It's a balancing act.
Okay, so full coverage is trying to reach everyone. What's less broad?
Multiple segment specialization, or selective specialization. Here, a company picks a few specific segments to target. Maybe these segments don't have much in common, but each looks profitable on its own. The big advantage is diversification. If one segment tanks, the others might still be okay. Within this, you might see product specialization selling one basic product type to several different segments, like a microscope maker selling to labs, universities, and schools. Risk is if that product gets replaced by new tech. Or market specialization serving many needs of just one particular customer group, like selling a whole range of products, but only to university labs. Risk is if that specific market shrinks or faces budget cuts.
Got it. Focusing the product or focusing the market. What about going even narrower?
That's single segment concentration, focusing all your energy on just one slice of the market. The benefit is you can become a real expert on that segment's needs, build a strong reputation, get efficient because you're specialized. If you become the leader in that segment, it can be very profitable. A niche is an even more focused version of this. It's a very narrowly defined group within a segment, usually looking for a distinctive mix of benefits. Key characteristics. They have unique needs. They'll often pay a premium. The niche is small but has potential. It doesn't attract loads of big competitors. And you gain efficiencies through specialization. And as the sources note, technology, especially online, makes targeting these smaller niches much more feasible and potentially profitable than it used to be.
And that brings us to the long tail idea again.
Exactly. Chris Anderson's concept, really boosted by online retail like Amazon or Netflix. The idea is that traditional retail focuses on the hits, the popular stuff that sells in volume that's the head of the demand curve. The long tail is all the other stuff, the vast number of niche products that don't sell much individually. Online, where shelf space is virtually unlimited and distribution costs are lower, you can offer all this niche stuff. Anderson argued that the total demand for all these niche items in the long tail could actually rival or even exceed the demand for the hits. It taps into all sorts of latent demand. Now, the sources do mention there's some debate, especially for physical products where storage and shipping still cost money. Is a tail really that profitable, or are some niches just too small? It's still playing out.
Interesting tension there between the potential and the practicalities. So what's the ultimate level of focus?
That would be individual marketing, sometimes called segments of one or one-to-one marketing. Basically, tailoring the offer, the product, the message down to the individual customer. This is increasingly possible because of big data and flexible manufacturing mass customization. Think custom configured computers or personalized recommendations. It works best, the sources say, for companies that collect lots of individual data, sell high-value items, have opportunities for cross-selling, or deal with products needing periodic replacement. But it requires significant investment, and you have to make sure customers actually value that level of customization enough to justify it.
Okay, that really covers the strategic options. Before we wrap up, though, we absolutely have to touch on the ethics. Targeting can be controversial, right?
Hugely important, yes. Companies have to be careful. Controversies pop up when targeting seems predatory, like aiming unhealthy products, specifically at kids, or targeting vulnerable or disadvantaged groups with potentially harmful offers like high-interest loans. But the key point the sources make is that the issue usually isn't who is targeted, but how and for what. It's about the intent and the impact. They use the Colgate Junior toothpaste example. Yes, it targets children, but the purpose is positive, promoting good dental health. That's generally seen as responsible. So, socially responsible marketing means finding that win-win where the targeting serves the company's interests and the interests of the people being targeted.
That's a critical distinction.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, understanding all of those segmentation variables, how companies evaluate segments, the different ways they can choose to target, from everyone down to individuals.
Yeah, hopefully you now have a much clearer picture of the thinking behind why companies market the way they do, why some brands feel like they get you and others don't. It's usually not accidental.
It definitely provides a solid framework. Thanks so much for walking us through all that.
My pleasure. And maybe just a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on based on all this. Think about an area you're interested in, maybe a hobby, an industry you follow, a community you're part of. Using these different segmentation lenses, geographic, demographic, psychographic, behavioral, or could you spot a potential niche? A specific group whose needs aren't quite being met by what's currently out there.
That's a fantastic question to ponder, a great way to apply this. Thank you again, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this deep dive.